With a very stern voice, Officer Wilson announced to the black woman in the car, "I smell something suspicious coming from this vehicle. Step out of the car," he said. Zora, the black woman, remains eerily calm, her eyes calculating every detail of her surroundings. The same tactical awareness that's kept her alive in combat zones across the world. "Officer, with all due respect, I don't consent to a search of my vehicle," Zora replied. "You people always think you're above the law," he snarls, slamming her to get out of the vehicle. But instead, Zora didn't move an inch. Wilson's posture stiffens. "Why are you making this difficult? Do you want me to make your life difficult? 'Cause I love making people's lives difficult." His hand moves to rest on his holster. Especially people who don't know their place. Wilson thought he was in total control and his prejudice could overshadow this black woman just like the others. But he had no idea who he was really messing with. He didn't know that Zora was a woman that held the power that he could never be able to reach. Have you ever experienced unfair treatment from an authority? Share your experience with us in the comments. As we delve into the story, if you stand against prejudice, injustice, and racism, click on the subscribe and like button. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. This was how it all started. Commander Zora Daniels navigated her silver sedan through familiar streets she hasn't seen in nearly 5 years. At 35, she carries herself with the unmistakable precision that comes from military discipline. Back straight, eyes constantly scanning her surroundings, movements efficient and purposeful. Few here know that the quiet girl who left after high school now commands one of the most elite SEAL teams in the Navy. To them, she's just another visitor passing through. Her hands rest at perfect 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. Old habits die hard when you've been trained to maintain control in chaos. The dashboard photo shows Zora in dress uniform, receiving a commendation, a life worlds away from these quiet streets. Millfield, the city she grew up in, hasn't changed much. The same courthouse where her grandfather once worked as a janitor. The police station where, as a child, she'd been told to always speak respectfully to officers. The community center where her mother taught piano until the funding was cut. What has changed is invisible to most. The growing divide between who gets protected and who gets suspected in this town. New businesses flourish on the north side while the south side struggles. New faces are welcome, depending on what they look like. Zora noticed Officer Blake Wilson's patrol car before he even flips on his lights. His sudden interest in her vehicle isn't surprising. She's been pulled over in her hometown before. This time, she's just here to visit her aunt after completing a classified operation overseas. 3 weeks of hard-earned leave after months of deployment. The flashing lights came on, no siren, just lights. Zora signals and pulls over perfectly, already reaching for her registration and license. By the book. Always by the book. Officer Wilson approaches, hand resting on his holster, an unnecessary posture for a routine traffic stop. "License and registration," he demands, not even attempting the courtesy as if explaining why he's pulled her over. "May I ask what the violation was, officer?" Zora's voice is steady, respectful but firm. "You rolled through that stop sign back there," Wilson says, despite the fact that Zora came to a complete stop, counting the regulation 3 seconds before proceeding. She handed over her documents without argument. No point challenging him now. Years of military strategy have taught her to choose her battles wisely. Wilson studied her license with growing suspicion. "You're not from around here anymore." "Just visiting family, sir. I'm on leave." His eyes narrowed as he shines his flashlight through her windows, sweeping across the immaculate interior. "Nothing to find, nothing to hide." "There is no contraband in my vehicle, Officer Wilson," Zora states calmly, noting his name badge. "I know my rights." Wilson steps closer, voice dropping to a near whisper. "Your kind always think you know your rights. Think you're so smart with your fancy words. He looks around to check if anyone's watching before continuing. But out here, I decide who has rights. I decide who goes home and who goes to jail tonight. Something flashes in Wilson's eyes, anger at being challenged, especially by someone who knows the law, someone who isn't intimidated. Exit the vehicle now, he demands, hand moving to his taser. You people always want to make things complicated. Zora complies with practiced precision, movements deliberate, hands always visible. The same protocol she's followed in hostile territories worldwide. Never give anyone reason to perceive a threat. Turn around and place your hands on the vehicle, Wilson orders, his voice rising as a second patrol car approaches. He leans in close enough that only she can hear. I've dealt with plenty of uppity ones like you. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you'd shown some respect. She complies, stance balanced, breathing controlled. 12 years of combat training screaming at her to defend herself, 12 years of discipline keeping her perfectly still. That's when it happens. Wilson deliberately bumped into her as he approached. Then suddenly, he staggered back dramatically, clutching his face. She hit me, he shouts toward his approaching colleague. Officer down, I need backup. Zora hasn't moved an inch. Her hands remain spread on the hood of her car, visible to the dashboard camera, visible to the approaching officer. I did not touch you, Officer Wilson, she stated calmly, loud enough for the cameras to pick up. Shut up, Wilson snarls, pressing her roughly against the vehicle. You're under arrest for assaulting an officer. As the handcuffs tighten around her wrists, Zora's mind wasn't on the injustice. It wasn't on anger. It was calculating, observing, planning. Have you ever witnessed or experienced an abuse of power? What would you have done in Zora's situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below and hit that subscribe button now. Because what happens next will show exactly what happens when the wrong person is framed by a corrupt system. The Millfield police station hasn't changed since Zora was a teenager. Same faded blue walls, same flickering fluorescent lights, same American flag hanging limply in the corner. But now she's seeing it from the other side, from behind handcuffs. Most people in Zora's position would be panicking. But Commander Daniels isn't most people. Her eyes methodically scan the room, cataloging exits, security cameras, shift rotations, the same tactical assessment she'd perform in enemy territory. 3 officers on duty, 2 booking stations, 1 security camera with a blind spot near the water cooler. Officer Wilson struts into the station, his face already showing signs of redness where he'll claim Zora struck him. Got a live one here, he announces, shoving Zora forward. Assaulted an officer during a routine stop. Sergeant Miller looked up from his desk, his expression shifting from boredom to subtle discomfort as he takes in Zora's composed demeanor. She hit you? Miller asked, eyebrow raised slightly. Doesn't look the type. They never do, Wilson replies, his false bravado echoing through the station. Caught her with drugs too. Regular traffic stop turned violent. Had to use considerable restraint to bring her in without escalating. Zora remained silent, her training kicking in. Years ago, in the brutal heat of training, Navy SEAL Hell Week, she stood for hours in the freezing Pacific surf while instructors screamed in her face, trying to break her. You think this is pain, Daniels? Her instructor had yelled as hypothermia set in. This isn't pain. This is just discomfort, and discomfort is temporary. Now, as Wilson embellishes his story to increasingly dramatic proportions, that lesson returns. This too is just temporary discomfort. She came at me with some kind of fighting move, Wilson claimed, demonstrating an exaggerated karate chop that would be comical if the situation weren't so serious. Lucky I've got quick reflexes. Officer Diaz, barely 25 and new to the force, glances between Wilson and Zora with growing uncertainty. He noticed what others missed. Zora's hands show no signs of having struck anyone. No redness, no swelling, nothing. Wilson disappeared for 30 minutes, returning with a triumphant smirk and a small plastic bag. "Look what I found hidden in her vehicle." The pills rattle as he drops them on the booking desk. Zora's eyes narrow imperceptibly. Her car has been meticulously maintained since the day she bought it. Military precision in everything. Those pills weren't there before. "Illegal prescription drugs," Wilson announces, explains the erratic behavior. Sergeant Miller frowns slightly. "You searched the vehicle after the assault?" "Had probable cause," Wilson replies too quickly. "Smelled something suspicious." As they photographed and fingerprint Zora, Officer Diaz notices something else. The mechanical precision with which she follows directions. The perfect military posture, even in handcuffs. The situational awareness that seems almost supernatural. "You can get your phone call," Diaz told her quietly, away from Wilson's earshot. "Most people would call family, a spouse, a lawyer. But Zora called a number she knows by heart, speaking in clipped, precise language. Lieutenant Commander Daniels, reporting delay in scheduled check-in. Location, Millfield Municipal Station. Situation, Charlie." She said on the call, speaking in codes. The desk officer assumed she was speaking to a relative. Only Diaz noticed the military precision in her language, the codes embedded in her seemingly casual conversation. Throughout booking, the disrespect was systematic. "Stand here, sweetheart. Smile for the camera, honey." Each demeaning comment met Zora's unwavering silence, her eyes cataloging faces, names, procedures. 2 hours later, Jeremy Wells, the overworked public defender, sits across from Zora in a dingy consultation room. His tie is stained, his eyes bloodshot from too many cases and too little sleep. "Look, Miss Daniels, the situation is pretty straightforward," he sighs, barely skimming her file. "You've got no priors, which is good, but assaulting an officer is serious. Add drug possession charges." "I didn't assault anyone," Zora stated calmly, "and those drugs were planted." Wells has heard this before, from guilty clients, from innocent ones. After 10 years in this system, they all sound the same to him. "Officer Wilson has documented injuries," he counters. "His report states you became combative during a routine traffic stop." "His report is false." Wells sighs again. "The DA is willing to offer a deal. Plead guilty to a lesser charge of resisting arrest, drop the assault and drug charges. 6 months probation." "No," Zora replies without hesitation. "I won't plead guilty to something I didn't do." "Miss Daniels, you need to understand the reality here. It's your word against a police officer's. Who do you think a jury in this town will believe?" Zora leans forward slightly. "Mr. Wells, I understand reality better than most. I've spent my career assessing threats and calculating odds. I'm not accepting a plea deal." As Wells leaves, frustrated by another client who won't see reason, Zora begins mentally mapping the case against her. Every inconsistency, every procedural flaw. This isn't just about defending herself anymore. It's about exposing a system that Wilson has clearly manipulated before. Across town, Wilson sits with Assistant District Attorney Karen Larson, painting a picture of a dangerous, unstable woman who attacked him without provocation. She was definitely on something, he insists. Exhibited classic signs of stimulant abuse. Aggressive, confrontational. Then out of nowhere, boom, attacks me. Larson nods, making notes, building the case based solely on Wilson's word. Another cog in a well-oiled machine. But machines can break down, and this one is about to encounter a wrench it never saw coming. At exactly 19:30 hours, the station phone rings. Sergeant Miller answers, his expression changing from boredom to confusion to concern. "Yes, sir. I understand, sir. No, I wasn't aware of her status." He glances toward the cells where Zora sits perfectly still, watching everything. "Yes, sir, I'll personally look into it immediately." Miller hangs up, staring at the phone like it might bite him. "Diaz," he calls out, "who authorized the arrest of Zora Daniels?" "Wilson, sir, said she assaulted him during a traffic stop." Miller rubs his face tiredly. "Well, we might have a problem. That was Naval Special Warfare Command asking why one of their officers missed a scheduled check-in. Diaz's eyes widened. Wait, she's military? Wilson didn't mention that. Not just military, Miller mutters. Something a lot more complicated. The machine has started to sputter. The first domino has begun to fall. In Courtroom 3 of the Millfield County Courthouse, the preliminary hearing for the state versus Zora Daniels began like clockwork. Judge Harmon, a 30-year veteran of the bench, presides with practiced efficiency. At 68, he'd seen it all, or thinks he has. Officer Blake Wilson takes the stand with rehearsed confidence, his uniform pressed, his demeanor solemn. A performance he's given many times before. Officer Wilson, please describe the events of yesterday afternoon, the prosecutor prompts. Wilson touched his face where a carefully applied makeup enhances the redness that should have faded by now. I pulled over the defendant for running a stop sign, standard procedure. But as soon as I approached the vehicle, I could tell something was off. The familiar script unfolds as Wilson builds his narrative, a routine stop. An uncooperative suspect, the smell of something suspicious. When I asked her to exit the vehicle, that's when she became aggressive, Wilson testified, his voice hitting the practiced notes of righteous indignation. She lunged at me with what I can only describe as some kind of military fighting technique. He demonstrates for the court a ridiculous pantomime of what no trained fighter would ever do. I sustained injuries to my face and neck as I subdued her. My training helped me use minimal force despite the threat. From her seat beside her public defender, Zora watched. Not with the nervous energy of most defendants, but with the calculated focus of someone mapping an enemy encampment. Her eyes tracked subtle interactions between the prosecutor and the clerk, the bailiff's position in relation to the exit. The judge's micro-expressions as Wilson's story grew increasingly elaborate. During the subsequent search of her vehicle, we discovered prescription medication not in her name, consistent with illegal distribution. Jeremy Wells, her public defender, barely took notes. His cross-examination is perfunctory at best. Officer Wilson, did my client have a prescription for these medications? Not that she provided, Wilson answered smoothly. No further questions, Your Honor. Zora leans over, whispers something to Wells. He shook his head dismissively. Judge Harmon, however, has presided over enough of Wilson's arrests and encourages his prejudice. Officer Wilson, you testified that the defendant struck you with what appeared to be a trained fighting technique. Did you seek medical attention for these injuries? Wilson hesitates, just briefly. No, Your Honor, I've been trained to handle worse. And this alleged fighting technique, have you encountered it before? Not specifically, Your Honor. He said, when Zora was called to enter her plea, something changed. Her posture straightened imperceptibly. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Wilson and the judge thought she was just like their other victims and would face unfair judgment. But that didn't happen the moment Zora spoke. This black woman isn't like any other victim they've had and will shock them to the brim. Not guilty, Your Honor, she said boldly. Two simple words, but delivered with such unwavering certainty that the energy in the courtroom shifts. Judge Harmon studied her with renewed interest. Miss Daniels, do you have anything you'd like to say before judgment? This was her time to act and take over, Zora thought to herself. Before her lawyer could intervene, Zora addressed the court directly. Your Honor, I am not a flight risk. I have served my country honorably for 12 years and continue to do so. I have no criminal record. The charges against me are fabricated, as will become evident in due course. The prosecutor jumps up. Your Honor, the defendant assaulted a police officer and was found with illegal prescription medication. The state requests bail be set at $50,000. Judge Harmon's gaze remains on Zora. What branch of the military, Miss Daniels? Navy, Your Honor. Current rank? Lieutenant Commander, Your Honor. Their mouths opened in fear. Nobody knew she held that power. Wilson shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't in his background check. And your current assignment? The judge asked. I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics of my assignment in open court, Your Honor. But my commanding officer can verify my status if necessary. The first card has been played. Not her full hand, not even close, but enough to change the game. Judge Harmon nods slowly. There was nothing he could do again. This black woman has enough power to turn things around. Bail is set at $5,000. Next case. The prosecutor's objection died on his lips as the judge's gavel falls. As Zora rose, something has changed in her demeanor. The passive observation has given way to controlled action. The hunter awakening. In the courthouse hallway, after posting bail, Zora made 2 calls. The first to her aunt, brief and reassuring. The second, longer and filled with military precision, to a number that doesn't appear in any public directory. Wilson, unable to accept that his plan didn't proceed as expected, made his fatal error. He approached Zora as she waits outside the courthouse. You think you're clever, don't you? He hisses, crowding her space, unaware that her peripheral vision is tracking his every movement. Dropping your military service like it means something. This isn't over, not by a long shot. Zora's response is measured, her voice calm. Officer Wilson, I believe it would be in your best interest to step back. Or what? You'll attack me again? His voice rose, drawing attention from passers-by. Nobody's going to believe you over me. I've been on the force for 15 years. You're just another perp with a fancy story. I haven't attacked anyone, Officer Wilson, but I do believe in preparation. Wilson didn't notice her hand casually positioned at her lapel, didn't register the small recording device, capturing his every word. You think that matters? I've put away people a lot smarter than you. By the time I'm done with you, you'll be lucky if you're just dishonorably discharged. I know people in this town. I know judges, prosecutors. This is my territory. Each threat, each admission of corruption, captured perfectly for future use. One more thing, Wilson adds with a sneer. You might want to check on that fancy car of yours. Impound lots can be so careless with personal property. Things go missing, get damaged. Real shame. As he walks away, satisfied with his intimidation, Zora allows herself the faintest smile. In tactical warfare, there's a principle. Sometimes you must allow the enemy to advance into a vulnerable position before you strike. Officer Blake Wilson has just marched directly into her trap. Have you ever encountered someone who completely underestimated you? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments and hit that subscribe button now, because what's coming next in Commander Daniels' strategy isn't just revenge, it's justice served. Within hours of Zora's release, the walls of her motel room bore the unmistakable organization of a military intelligence briefing. Case files, timelines, connections mapped with precision. Each element meticulously arranged with the exactitude that comes from years of planning high-risk operations, where the smallest details determine who lives and who dies. 6 years earlier, during advanced SEAL intelligence training, Zora had excelled at exactly this kind of work. While other trainees focused on direct action tactics, she demonstrated an uncanny ability to piece together fragments of information into actionable intelligence. Now, those same skills focus on Officer Blake Wilson. His arrest record, his testimony in previous cases, his financial transactions. A picture begins to emerge, not of an overzealous cop, but of something more sinister. The pattern is unmistakable once you know what to look for. 17 arrests in the past year with remarkable similarities. Predominantly minority suspects, traffic stops that escalated to searches, drugs conveniently discovered in vehicles, charges that would be dropped in exchange for guilty pleas to lesser offenses. The statistics tell a story that most would miss, but Zora isn't most people. A knock at the door interrupts her analysis. 3 quick taps, exactly as arranged. Officer Diaz stands outside, still in uniform but clearly off duty, nervousness evident in his posture. "I shouldn't be here," he says, glancing over his shoulder as he entered. "Yet here you are," Zora replies calmly, offering him a seat. "Because something doesn't feel right." Diaz took in the organized investigation board, his eyes widening. "You're really military, aren't you? Wilson said you made that up." "Lieutenant Commander, Naval Special Warfare." "Look, I don't know what's happening, but Wilson's arrest reports, they follow a pattern. Always the same language. Always the same charges." Diaz hesitates, then continues. "Last month, I saw him planting evidence in a suspect's car. When I asked about it, Sergeant Miller pulled me aside, told me to forget what I saw if I wanted to keep my job." The final piece clicks into place. Miller's discomfort at the station wasn't just uncertainty, it was complicity. Diaz slides a USB drive across the table. Departmental records, arrest histories, body cam footage that never made it into evidence. I made copies before they could disappear. The data reveals what Zora had suspected but couldn't yet prove. Wilson's history of fabricated charges wasn't random. It's targeted and calculated and profitable. In the quiet of night, as she analyzed financial records, the connection showed up. Deposits to offshore accounts following certain arrests. A pattern of suspects who worked for a rival drug operation being targeted while others walked free. The pills planted in her car. The same prescription medication that had been seized in a raid 3 months earlier but never properly logged into evidence. Wilson isn't just a bigoted cop abusing his power. He's on someone's payroll. After hours of research, the trail leads to Marcus Reynolds, owner of 3 nightclubs on the north side of town and rumored supplier for half the county. The same Marcus Reynolds who contributes generously to the police benevolent fund. The same Marcus Reynolds whose competitors keep finding themselves arrested by Officer Wilson. More disturbing are the case files of those who tried to fight back. Tamika Johnson, who filed a complaint against Wilson 3 years ago, found herself facing additional charges until she withdrew her statement. James Martinez, who had video evidence contradicting Wilson's testimony, mysteriously lost that footage when his house was burglarized before trial. The pattern of intimidation and corruption extends beyond Wilson to parts of the department itself. Sergeant Miller's signature appears on dozens of questionable evidence logs, each one helping to bury procedural violations that would have exposed the scheme. As dawn breaks, Zora places one final photo on her board. Sergeant Miller meeting with Reynolds behind a closed restaurant, an image captured by a local blogger who thought he was documenting an innocent meeting, but was actually photographing the gears of corruption turning. At the station, Wilson sat at his desk, scrolling through personnel databases. The name Zora Daniels finally returns a hit, a basic military service record. Navy, as she claimed, but nothing indicating special operations. Nothing suggesting she's anything more than an administrative officer with a desk job. Administrative specialist, he snorts, showing the screen to a fellow officer. Pencil pusher trying to act tough. What he doesn't realize, what he can't access, is that Zora's true service record is classified, buried behind security clearances he can't imagine. The sanitized version he's seeing is deliberately designed to conceal her actual role and capabilities. Wilson leans back in his chair, confidence restored. Just another defendant to break. Just another case to manipulate. But unknown to him, the trap was set. The evidence compiled, the strategy mapped out with military precision. Commander Zora Daniels isn't fighting for herself anymore. She's fighting for Tamika Johnson. For James Martinez. For every person Wilson has victimized in his years of corruption. And when Navy SEALs fight, they don't fight to participate. They fight to win. The black SUV with government plates arrived at the Millfield Inn without fanfare. Its sole occupant, Captain Richard Hargrove, arrived in his tailored civilian suit. Zora opens the door with measured caution, then stands aside with the faintest smile. "Didn't expect to see you in person, Captain. When one of my best officers gets arrested on bogus charges, I make exceptions to protocol." For the first time since her arrest, Zora's military bearings softened slightly. The presence of her commanding officer, the man who selected her for SEAL training when many doubted a woman could complete the program, brings a sense of validation to her fight. Hargrove surveys the investigation board with professional appreciation. "I see your intelligence gathering skills haven't dulled in peacetime." "This isn't exactly peace, sir." Hargrove nods, placing a classified folder on the desk. "Your message triggered some inquiries. Turns out Officer Wilson has pinged on federal radar before." The folder contained what Zora has been missing: the official documentation that transforms suspicion into actionable intelligence. Wilson's bank records showing unexplained deposits corresponding with certain arrests. Internal affairs complaints buried by sympathetic superiors. Connections to known drug operations that crossed state lines, bringing them into federal jurisdiction. "There's someone else you should meet," Hargrove says, checking his watch. Right on schedule, a sharp knock at the door. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen enters, her JAG Corps insignia visible on her impeccable uniform. "Commander Daniels," Chen nods professionally. "I've reviewed your case. Textbook frame up, but they made mistakes. Multiple procedural violations. Chain of custody issues with the alleged evidence. Inconsistencies in Officer Wilson's testimony. Over the next hour, a precise military operation takes shape. Not with weapons and tactics, but with legal strategies and evidence chains." Chen outlines jurisdictional authorities, procedural requirements, and the exact legal framework that will expose Wilson's corruption. "We don't just want dismissal," Zora explains, pointing to her board. "Wilson is part of a larger operation. These victims deserve justice." Chen's strategy is surgical. "We'll use the preliminary hearing to spring the trap. Once Wilson commits to his false testimony under oath, we'll introduce the contradictory evidence. Force him to either admit his lies or commit perjury." "What about Sergeant Miller?" Hargrove asks, studying the connection charts. "Secondary target," Zora explains, "but essential to proving the systemic nature of the corruption." As the sun sets, the plan crystallizes. Not just a defense strategy, but a counteroffensive designed to dismantle the entire corrupt operation. Chen will replace Zora's public defender. Hargrove will ensure federal authorities are standing by once the local case breaks open. Wilson won't go down without a fight, Chen warns. Men like him rarely do. "I'm counting on it," Zora replies, her calm confidence in stark contrast to the storm they're about to unleash. Across town, that very man paces his living room, a glass of whiskey in hand, his cool facade cracking for the first time. Something doesn't feel right about this case. Despite the sanitized military record he found, Wilson can't shake the feeling that Zora Daniels is different from his usual targets. His phone buzzed with a text from Sergeant Miller. "Hearing tomorrow. Stick to the script. This goes away like all the others." But will it? The doubt gnaws at him, unfamiliar and unwelcome. His usual methods, intimidation, evidence manipulation, procedural shortcuts, have always worked before. Yet something about Daniel's composure in court, the way she observed everything without fear, triggered an instinct he's long ignored. As midnight approached, Wilson made his fateful decision. If there's something to find on Zora Daniels, he'll find it himself. The motel parking lot was nearly empty as Wilson's unmarked car pulls in. Room 214 showed no lights. His police training kicks in as he approaches the door, tools ready to make quick work of the lock. What he doesn't know, what he couldn't see, were the custom motion sensors Zora installed hours earlier, the military-grade cameras now recording his every move. The lock yields to his tools. The door opens silently. Wilson steps inside, flashlight beams sweeping across the darkened room. Empty. Not just vacant, completely cleared out. No investigation board. No evidence. No sign that Zora Daniels was ever here. Just a single red light blinking on a device mounted near the ceiling. "Looking for something, Officer Wilson?" The voice came from a speaker on the device. Zora's voice, calm and expectant, as if she'd been waiting for exactly this moment. The color drains from Wilson's face as he realizes his fatal error. The trap wasn't set for court tomorrow. The trap was here. And he just walked right into it. Behind him, flashing lights illuminate the parking lot. Not police lights, but federal agents, positioned exactly where Zora calculated they would have optimal lines of sight. In warfare, the perfect ambush isn't just about the attack. It's about knowing your enemies so well that you can predict their movements, manipulate their decisions, and lead them exactly where you want them to go. Wilson stood frozen as the magnitude of his miscalculation becomes clear. He wasn't hunting Zora Daniels. She has been hunting him. The Millfield County Courthouse has stood for over a century, weathering storms both literal and political. But the tempest brewing within its walls today may be unlike any it has faced before. Assistant District Attorney Karen Larson stares at the conflicting files on her desk with growing unease. On one side, Officer Wilson's arrest report and evidence log, familiar, formulaic, the kind she's prosecuted dozens of times before. On the other, a sealed envelope delivered by courier containing dashcam footage that directly contradicts Wilson's sworn statement, along with service records showing the defendant isn't just military, she's decorated special forces. "This can't be right," she murmurs, reaching for her phone. Her call to Wilson goes straight to voicemail. Unusual for an officer on the eve of testifying. What Larson doesn't know is that Wilson is currently being questioned about his unauthorized entry into Motel Room 214, his police credentials temporarily suspended pending investigation. Down the hall, Judge Raymond Harmon reviews evidence in his chambers, his expression darkening with each document. 30 years on the bench has given him an instinct for cases that aren't what they seem. This one is raising every red flag in his considerable experience. The evidence before him includes time-stamped footage from Wilson's own body camera, with gaps that coincide precisely with the alleged assault and drug discovery. More troubling are the statistical analyses showing patterns in Wilson's arrests that defy random probability. Targeted demographics, similar charges, cases resolved primarily through plea deals rather than trials. "Your Honor," his clerk interrupts. "Lieutenant Commander Chen from the Judge Advocate General's Corps is requesting to be recognized as counsel for the defendant tomorrow." Judge Harmon raises an eyebrow. Military lawyers don't typically involve themselves in civilian criminal cases unless something exceptional is at play. Across town, Wilson's partner, Officer Trevor Reynolds, sits uncomfortably in his patrol car, phone pressed to his ear. "Look, I can't just make up testimony," he protests. "The body cam footage doesn't show what you're saying happened." Wilson's voice is strained, desperate. "Just say your angle didn't capture everything. Say you saw her make an aggressive move." "Blake, this is perjury we're talking about. I could lose my badge. We could lose a lot more than that if this case falls apart." The desperation in Wilson's voice was new. The once confident officer now sounds like a man watching his carefully constructed world crumble. Meanwhile, in a small conference room at the federal building, Zora meets with Officer Diaz and two other witnesses, former defendants who had encountered Wilson's corrupt tactics, but were too intimidated to come forward until now. "You'll be protected," Zora assures them, her manner calm but authoritative. "Federal witness protection if necessary." Her methodical preparation isn't just about winning a case. It's about dismantling a system that has victimized dozens of innocent people. Each witness statement, each piece of evidence, each procedural document, arranged with the same precision she would use to plan a hostage extraction. Commander, Lieutenant Commander Chen says, entering with a file. We've located 3 more cases with identical patterns, all minorities, all traffic stops escalating to searches, all involving the same type of planted evidence. Zora nodded, adding the information to her already substantial case. The prosecution doesn't just face a defendant fighting back. They face a coordinated military-grade operation designed to expose years of corruption. As twilight settles over Millfield, Zora stood at the window of her new secure location, looking out at the town where she spent her childhood. The view triggers memories she rarely allows herself to revisit. 25 years earlier, 10-year-old Zora had stood outside this same courthouse, holding her father's hand as he tried to file a complaint against officers who had ransacked their home in a mistaken drug raid. No drugs were found, but the family's savings, cash kept at home because of her father's distrust of banks after a history of discriminatory lending practices, was confiscated as suspected drug money. "They won't even look at us," her father had said, defeat in his voice as the clerk refused to provide the proper forms. It was the first time she had seen her proud, strong father broken by a system designed to break him. 2 years later, the community center where her mother taught music faced closure after police raids drove away attendees. The same community center that had kept countless kids off the streets, given them purpose and direction. Zora had been one of them, finding discipline and focus through programs that channeled her intensity into productive paths. That community center still stands, but barely. Now, under threat from developers with ties to Marcus Reynolds, the same man connected to the drug operation that Wilson protects. The same developers who stand to profit handsomely if the poorer sections of town can be acquired cheaply for revitalization. It's not just justice driving Zora now. It's the recognition that Wilson and his corrupt allies aren't just targeting random individuals. They're systematically undermining the community itself, creating fear, destroying trust, eliminating support systems. Across town, Wilson meets with Sergeant Miller in a dimly lit bar far from their usual haunts. "This was supposed to be straightforward," Miller hisses. "Another arrest, another conviction, another tick in your stats for the promotion board next month." The truth emerges through their tense exchange. Wilson's aggression hasn't just been bigotry. It's been a calculated campaign to inflate his arrest statistics before the upcoming review for detective. Each conviction another step toward the gold shield he's coveted for years, the position that would finally give him status and power beyond his patrol duties. The more arrests, the more he gets closer to his promotion was the plan. "I need this promotion, Miller. You know what we've invested to make it happen." What neither man realized was that their conversation is being recorded by federal agents at a nearby table, part of Zora's comprehensive operation to capture not just Wilson's crimes, but the entire corrupt network. As Zora returned to her temporary quarters, a security officer hands her an envelope that was left at the front desk. No return address, no identifying marks. Inside, a single photograph, Zora's aunt's house with a red X drawn across it, and a typed note, "Drop the case, or they suffer next." The threat is amateur, desperate, not the work of professionals, but of a man watching his world collapse. Wilson's panic is showing. What he doesn't understand, what he can't understand, is that he's made the worst possible mistake a tactician can make. He just threatened someone a Navy SEAL loves. The photograph didn't frighten Zora. Instead, it focused her. It transformed her methodical pursuit of justice into something even more powerful, a personal mission. Wilson had just ensured that Commander Zora Daniels will not stop until justice is complete, total, absolute. Here comes the D-Day. The courtroom falls silent as the bailiff calls the case. The State of Ohio versus Zora Daniels. The atmosphere crackled with tension. Not the usual routine tension of legal proceedings, but something deeper. Something primal. The air before a storm breaks. Judge Harmon surveyed the room with narrowed eyes. The gallery was unusually full for a preliminary hearing. Most were faces he couldn't recognize, stern men and women with military bearings seated strategically throughout the room. Captain Hargrove sits directly behind the defense table, his presence a silent statement of support. Officer Wilson takes the stand with practiced confidence, but those watching closely might notice subtle signs of strain. A tightness around his eyes, fingers that tap restlessly against his thigh when not speaking. He sweated through his crisp uniform in places, despite the courtroom's cool air conditioning. Officer Wilson, the prosecutor begins, please describe for the court the events leading to the defendant's arrest. Wilson recites his version of events with rehearsed precision. The routine traffic stop. The suspect's alleged aggression. The sudden attack that left him injured. The discovery of illicit prescription medication. She came at me without warning, Wilson testifies, pointing to the makeup-enhanced marks on his face. Used some kind of military fighting technique. If not for my defensive training, my injuries could have been severe. Jeremy Wells, Zora's public defender, rises for cross-examination, his demeanor suggesting the perfunctory questioning of someone going through the motions. But then, something unexpected happens. Your Honor, Wells announces, at this time, the defense would like to introduce Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen of the Judge Advocate General's Corps, who will be taking over as counsel for Commander Daniels. A ripple of surprise passed through the courtroom. Wilson's face flickers with uncertainty as Chen approaches the bench, credentials in hand. Your Honor, the United States Navy has an interest in these proceedings as they involve a decorated officer facing charges that could impact national security matters. Judge Harmon reviewed her credentials, then nods. The court recognizes Lieutenant Commander Chen as counsel for the defendant. The shift in energy is palpable. This is no longer a routine case of a civilian against local law enforcement. This has become something else entirely. Throughout it all, Zora remained composed at the defense table, her posture perfect, her gaze steady. Unlike most defendants who shrink under the weight of proceedings, she sits with the quiet confidence of someone who has faced far worse than a courtroom. Chen's approach to cross-examination is nothing like Wells would have been. She is surgical, precise, and devastatingly prepared. Officer Wilson, you testified that my client struck you in the face, resulting in these injuries you're displaying today, correct? That's correct, Wilson responds. I'd like to present Defense Exhibit A, Chen states, nodding to a technical specialist who brings up dashcam footage on the courtroom screens. This is the unedited footage from your patrol car's dashboard camera. The footage plays in crystal clarity. Zora, following Wilson's instructions, stands with her hands visible on the vehicle at all times. The crucial moment arrives. Wilson approaches, and then suddenly staggers backward, clutching his face. But the camera angle clearly shows that Zora never moved. Officer Wilson, would you care to explain how the defendant struck you without moving her hands from the vehicle? Wilson shifts uncomfortably. The angle doesn't show everything. Perhaps this angle will be more illuminating, Chen continues, introducing a second video, footage from a nearby business's security camera that captured the scene from a different perspective. Again, it clearly shows Zora remaining motionless while Wilson performs his theatrical stagger. The prosecutor rises to object, but Chen is already moving on, calling her first expert witness, Dr. Elaine Tremblay, a forensic medical examiner. Dr. Tremblay, you've examined the photographs of Officer Wilson's alleged injuries both immediately after the arrest and today in court. What are your findings? The doctor points to key areas using a laser pointer. The marking patterns are inconsistent with impact trauma from a strike. There's no swelling progression consistent with blunt force trauma. The discoloration pattern suggests artificial enhancement or self-inflicted minor abrasions, not impact from another person's hand or fist. Wilson's face darkens as his injuries are systematically debunked by medical science. Chen's next evidence is even more damning: a technical analysis of Wilson's body camera. Your Honor, the prosecution provided body camera footage with a suspicious 47-second gap precisely during the alleged assault. Our technical expert has recovered the deleted footage. The recovered video plays, showing Wilson deliberately turning away from his dash camera's view, then reaching up to temporarily disable his body camera before re-enabling it and claiming assault. Officer Wilson, Chen continues, her voice measured but relentless. Did you tamper with official evidence by deleting this footage? There must have been a technical malfunction, Wilson stammers, a malfunction that precisely coincided with the alleged assault and miraculously resolved itself seconds later. The case continues to unravel as Chen calls Officer Diaz to the stand. His testimony directly contradicts Wilson's account of the evidence collection, revealing that Wilson had gone alone to search Zora's car after she was already in custody. And did Officer Wilson follow proper evidence handling protocols? Chen asked. No, ma'am, Diaz testifies. The pills were never properly logged into evidence. Chain of custody was broken multiple times. With each piece of evidence, each testimony, Wilson's case collapses further. The prosecutor, recognizing the disaster unfolding, attempts to salvage what she can through objections and procedural arguments, but the truth has gained too much momentum to be contained. Chen saves her most powerful revelation for last. Your Honor, the defense would like to introduce Commander Zora Daniels' service record into evidence. Wilson, already reeling from the systematic dismantling of his case, watches in growing horror as Chen presents a document to the court. Commander Daniels is not, as Officer Wilson assumed, an administrative officer. She is a decorated Navy SEAL with the Naval Special Warfare Development Group, one of only 3 women to have completed SEAL training and qualify for Special Operations deployment. A murmur rippled through the courtroom as Chen continues. Everyone was put on a hot seat as more details were revealed. Commander Daniels has been awarded the Silver Star for Valor in Combat, 3 Purple Hearts, and the Defense Meritorious Service Medal. She has led over 30 successful high-risk operations in theaters of war across the globe. Her hand-to-hand combat training includes mastery of multiple martial arts disciplines taught to Special Forces operators. Chen pauses, letting the significance sink in. Had Commander Daniels actually struck Officer Wilson as he claims, his injuries would have been severe and unmistakable. The idea that someone with her training would have left superficial marks that could be covered with makeup is, frankly, absurd. Wilson stares at Zora with new eyes, finally understanding what he's been up against all along. Not just another defendant to intimidate, not just another case to manipulate, but a warrior whose discipline, training, and strategic thinking far exceed his own. Furthermore, Chen continues, Commander Daniels was in Millfield on authorized leave following a classified operation that required extensive physical exertion and situational awareness. Her reaction to Officer Wilson's unlawful detention showed remarkable restraint, not aggression. Judge Harmon, who has been watching the proceedings with increasing concern, turns to Wilson. Officer Wilson, in light of this evidence, do you wish to reconsider your testimony regarding the events of that day? The question hangs in the air, an opportunity for Wilson to salvage some small measure of dignity by acknowledging his lies. But pride and desperation override wisdom. I stand by my testimony, Your Honor. It's the final nail in his coffin. Perjury now added to his mounting legal troubles. For the first time since the hearing began, Zora allowed herself the faintest smile. Not of triumph or revenge, but of justice finally taking form. The systematic corruption that has plagued her hometown, that once broke her father's spirit, that threatened the community she grew up in, it now faces the uncompromising light of truth. And Officer Blake Wilson, who thought he was dealing with just another vulnerable victim, now understands too late exactly who he chose to target. A woman trained to dismantle threats far more dangerous than him. As the evidence mounted against him, Officer Blake Wilson's composure fractures. The cool, controlled demeanor that has served him for 15 years on the force crumbles before the eyes of the court. These accusations are absurd, he insists, voice rising with each word. This is an orchestrated attack on law enforcement. On me personally. Judge Harmon, who has watched the proceedings with growing certainty, removes his glasses slowly. His voice, when he speaks, carries the weight of 3 decades dispensing justice. Having reviewed the evidence presented by both sides, this court finds numerous procedural violations and significant contradictions in Officer Wilson's testimony. The evidence clearly shows that the defendant did not assault Officer Wilson as claimed, and that the alleged evidence was improperly handled at best, deliberately planted at worst. Wilson's knuckles whiten as he grips the witness stand, the last vestiges of his professional facade slipping away. The charges against Commander Daniels are hereby dismissed with prejudice, Judge Harmon continues. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into possible criminal misconduct by Officer Wilson. It's the breaking point. 15 years of barely concealed prejudice, of unchecked power, of a system that enabled rather than restrained his worst impulses, all explode in a moment of unrestrained fury. This is because she's military, isn't it? Wilson shouts, rising from the witness stand. If she were just another. He catches himself, but too late. The racial slur he nearly uttered hangs unspoken but unmistakable in the air of courtroom 3. Officer Wilson, Judge Harmon warns, you will control yourself in my courtroom. But Wilson is beyond warnings now, beyond control. You people always stick together. The system's rigged. She's no better than any other. That's enough, Officer Wilson, the judge interrupts sharply, motioning to the bailiff. You are in contempt of this court. Throughout Wilson's meltdown, Zora remains seated, her posture unchanged, her expression reflecting not triumph or anger, but a deep, almost sorrowful understanding. This man's hatred and corruption have damaged not just his victims but himself, corrupted what might once have been a genuine desire to serve into something unrecognizable. Commander Daniels, Judge Harmon addresses Zora, you are free to go. This court apologizes for the ordeal you have endured. Zora rises with military precision. Thank you, Your Honor. Just 3 words, but delivered with such dignity that they stand in stark contrast to Wilson's unraveling. As the bailiff approached Wilson, 2 federal agents stepped forward from the gallery, badges displayed. Officer Blake Wilson, the lead agent, announces, you are under arrest for evidence tampering, witness intimidation, perjury, civil rights violations, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The courtroom erupts into murmurs as Wilson is handcuffed, not by local law enforcement, but by federal authorities. The significance isn't lost on anyone present. This isn't just about one officer or one case. What is the meaning of this? The prosecutor demands, but her question is answered by Captain Hargrove, who rises from his seat. Officer Wilson's activities have been under federal investigation for some time as part of a larger operation targeting corruption and civil rights violations. Commander Daniels' case simply accelerated the timeline. As Wilson was led away, his desperate eyes lock onto Zora's. You set me up, he he spits. This was all a trap. Zora met his gaze steadily. No, Officer Wilson, you set yourself up. I simply ensured that truth had its day in court. It's the final reversal. The hunter becoming the hunted, the accuser becoming the accused, the man who abused power facing the consequences of his actions. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered as federal officials announced the broader implications. An ongoing investigation into departmental corruption, evidence of systematic civil rights violations, and the cooperation of Sergeant Miller, who has agreed to testify against his colleagues in exchange for leniency. This case has revealed disturbing patterns that extend beyond a single officer. The federal prosecutor announces, "We intend to follow the evidence wherever it leads." 3 days later, in the community center that once faced closure, Zora sits across from Officer Diaz. The young officer's decision to come forward to provide crucial evidence despite personal risk represents everything that Wilson was not: integrity over expediency, truth over power. "What made you step forward?" Zora asks. "You risked your career." Diaz looks down at his badge thoughtfully. "I became an officer to protect people, not to prey on them. When I saw what was happening, I couldn't be part of it." That choice, the harder choice, is what real service looks like, Zora tells him. Sometimes the greatest courage isn't facing an enemy. It's facing ourselves and our own institutions when they fail their purpose. Around them, the community center buzzes with renewed activity. News of the corruption scandal has prompted an outpouring of support and funding. Children practice at newly donated musical instruments, echoes of Zora's own childhood, but with a future less shadowed by systemic injustice. The department's implementing new oversight mechanisms, Diaz explains. Body cameras that can't be disabled, civilian review boards with actual authority, implicit bias training that's more than just checking boxes. Small steps perhaps, but meaningful ones. A community beginning to heal from wounds long ignored. 1 week after the dismissal of charges, Zora stood in her dress uniform at a naval ceremony, the ribbons and medals on her chest telling a story of service most civilians will never fully comprehend. Her commanding officer pins yet another commendation. Not for battlefield heroism this time, but for moral courage. "Commander Daniels demonstrated the highest traditions of naval service," the citation reads. Her actions brought honor not just to herself, but to the principles our uniform represents. Across town, in a very different setting, Blake Wilson sits in a rehabilitation program for former officers. Part of his plea agreement, the man who once wielded his badge as a weapon now must confront the prejudices and failures that transformed him from protector to predator. His journey toward accountability had just begun, far longer and harder than the path that brought him to this point. Yet in his fall from power, there is the possibility, however small, of redemption. Not through escape from consequences, but through finally facing them. As the sun sets over Millfield, Zora stood at her father's grave, placing a small stone on the headstone in quiet remembrance. "The system that broke you didn't break me," she whispers. "And maybe now it's a little less broken itself." Her leave ends tomorrow. She'll return to missions classified and dangerous, to a world where split-second decisions determine life and death. But she leaves behind a hometown slightly more just than she found it. And for a warrior like Commander Zora Daniels, that might be the most meaningful victory of all. Did you enjoy the story? Like, subscribe and share to others so everyone can learn a lesson from it. See you in the next video.